Technology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Hello and welcome to Phishing for Answers, where the carrot beats the stick and we flip the script on the bad guys, turning humans from easy targets into the strongest line of defense.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and don't necessarily reflect those of their employers or sponsors. We're seasoned security professionals, but this is a conversation, not a custom consultation. Need specific guidance? Reach out to Joshua Crumbaugh directly.
Get ready. Phishing for Answers starts right now.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. It's actually been a minute since we had an episode, sort of in the off season, about to start back up. So we'll just call this the first episode of season 2. But today we have with us Amy Diestler, correct?
Yes, you got it.
The CISO over at the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Medicine.
And public health, yep.
And public health, yes. Okay. I forgot what the PH stood for in it.
That's okay.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, your intro is awesome. I love that so much. So that's great. I'm Amy Diestler. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the School of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I think my career, it maybe started out a little bit, maybe not your traditional trajectory into becoming a CISO. My undergrad is actually in accounting, and I actually became a financial auditor for a little while. And so while I got to do that, that was kind of where I got the opportunity to try out IT auditing. And so while I was doing IT auditing, that was kind of my first experience into the world of cybersecurity, the world of governance, risk management, and compliance specifically. And so because of that, I really realized that I really enjoyed that a lot more than financial auditing. And so I kind of pivoted for my career and did a little bit of the IT auditing and consulting for a number of years. At that point, then I realized that with all the travel, I wanted to try something a little bit closer to home. So I moved into more of the governance, risk management, and compliance space specifically. And then realizing that I had kind of missed, as part of the auditing and consulting, I had an opportunity, to really grow staff members, have kind of a team, and I really kind of missed that. And so decided to pivot to the School of Medicine and Public Health, where I was the governance, risk management, and compliance manager for a few years, and then kind of made my way up to Chief Information Security Officer. So yeah, that's a little bit more about me.
Yeah, very cool. I think that's pretty common where, well, I mean, let's be honest, cybersecurity degrees are relatively new.
Right.
And I think run into more people that had their undergrad in something other than information systems than I do people that had, that information systems undergrad that are in this space. I know I'm that way. My undergrad was in marketing and advertising, which you would think doesn't relate until you start getting into awareness and education. And then all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, that degree is not completely worthless. Or at least that's how it went for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for accounting too, right? Like, I think a lot of you can fully relate to this, I think, with your marketing background, but also what you're doing with, phishing and all the human behavioral stuff, I'll say as well. But, especially the auditing and the consulting, that requires a lot of people skills. And so I think there's a lot of times where you think that you're not, what did my undergrad really prepare me for? Critical thinking. How do I use those skills? What does that look like, right? And so there are times very much so where I use a lot of the skills that I built when I was doing auditing and consulting, where it's looking at a workflow, understanding how to make it better. And someone said to me the other day, sometimes your job is just to ask questions and ask the right questions, essentially. And I thought that was so key of kind of going back to my auditing consulting days, where did I ask the right question to get to the right answer for the client, essentially kind of deal. So totally agree. I think that there are a lot of transferable skills that I don't think folks always realize either.
Well, I mean, and this is actually a topic that's come up quite a few times on this program, is just how much the people skills and more in particularly the sales skills are required to be good at cybersecurity. Just what's your experience been there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's really been, I've always said I have kind of a people first leadership. That's my bread and butter, I guess I'll say, or that's where I feel most, comfortable, most, most authentic to myself as well. And so I think it's not only about your team and trying to build those folks up and, how do you give them all those stretch opportunities and really, help them along in their careers, but at the end of the day, we're all dealing with people. And so, the more that you can kind of connect with those folks, the more that you can have conversations with them. I think cybersecurity sometimes comes along with like, oh, they're just going to tell me no, and I don't really want to talk to them, right? So the more that you can encourage folks to want to come talk to you, to say, well, we're just going to have a conversation, tell me more about this kind of deal. I think the more that you can get folks to start talking, the more you realize that like there's more in common than we ever realize. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to get our jobs done. And what does that look like essentially?
Oh, I completely agree. And I think part of that is making it as, or instead of being the department of no, being the department that gets things done, that enables people to do their business. And, one thing that stood out to me is that there's a behavioral science formula for behavior change, and it's motivation, or I guess it's whatever the behavior that you're looking for, will never happen without motivation, ability, and prompting. And you really touch on it there of getting people to talk to us. And I think that really comes down to ability. When we start making things easier instead of harder, people are more likely to come to the cybersecurity teams. And we've seen it a few times recently with, like, for example, passkeys. They all of a sudden allow our users to be more secure, but have an easier experience logging in. Things like that, to me, I think are really the holy grail. And the more of that we can do, where cybersecurity is invisible and it's just happening there, the better off we are.
Absolutely. Totally agree. I think we always say within my team, like, are we giving them the easy path? Is the easy path also the secure path, essentially, right? Or am I making them climb a mountain and now they're like, I've gotten halfway up and I don't really want to go this way, kind of deal. So,
well, I mean, that there's a lot to it. Users, we saw Apple when they were trying to roll out passcodes for phones. They got to, I think, a 48% adoption, and they just plateaued. They could not get beyond that. And so at the point they implemented Touch ID, and all of a sudden jumped up to almost double. I think it was like, or over double, like 80, not over, but almost double, 86% or something like that. So just incredible numbers. And then when they introduced Face ID and made it even easier, they saw another drastic bump. So I think, we can all learn from their example there, where, for too often we've made cybersecurity more and more difficult. And that's fine. But I like the new trend where we're all of a sudden making it invisible and easier. I've got a buddy that used to run the red team for MIT, and he developed a technology that uses passkeys with Bluetooth. And it's like an enterprise technology where your computer can automatically open and unlock for you when you just get close to it, which I think stuff like that is really cool. And I'm excited to see how it helps us make it even easier and more transparent.
Absolutely. I think people love that kind of technology when it's kind of magic to them. Like, kind of deal like when you're your average person, like, oh, that's so cool that it just does that. I mean, I still get excited, but I'm sure you do as well, like that kind of cool stuff where like, someone says, oh, yeah, we just trained this AI model to do this thing. And you're like, that's so cool. And then your cybersecurity brain kicks in right a little bit. And you're like, wait, but did you do all the things to secure it as well? And like, how did you implement that? How did you bring those together?
I like it. Well, let's use that or switch to AI because, well, speaking of things that are just almost magic, and I mean, it's funny because I don't even think the people that develop the models truly understand how they work. We develop this thing and it's like it does amazing things, but we still we're researching and better understanding how they actually work. But to me, I think it's just phenomenal what can be done with AI these days. And so along that line, before we get into the negative of it, what's some of the cool stuff that you've seen lately?
Yeah, I think some of the cool stuff, and I will say being in, higher education, I think sometimes we have a little bit more caution when it comes to some of the new things, especially around, AI and things like, I'll just say new technologies in general. But some of the cool things we've been using it for has really been around, our risk assessments and how do we make those faster and better, essentially, like, and how do we train new folks around risk assessments? How do we get plain language? That's been a really key one for us, is just using it for plain language to be able to share with folks, especially. I've also used it a lot when it comes to wanting to understand a little bit better about regulations. How do they map? How, and a lot of them have already been mapped, but sometimes you'll get a little bit more with any of these things, obviously, right? I want to do a review, but at the same, some sort of human review level. But at the same time, it's so much easier to just pull some things for folks and be like, here's some instructions, or here's something that, you can use basically to follow. And it took me 5 seconds to put it together for you, essentially. So we've tried to use it a lot for that. I would love to see in the future where we start going a little bit more of the agentic AI and kind of having some sort of agent that you can interact with to be able to say, here's what I think your risk is, kind of deal. And here's why I think that, you answer some questions and it'll kind of spit something out for you. So I'd love to see that in the future for us.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot more of that agentic insight where just like you can talk to Chat GPT and now connect it to your different applications and whatnot. I know we use Google Workspace, and so I have Gemini, and I can say, hey, Gemini, create this appointment, throw it on my calendar, and it does it. Like I'll say, well, break this into 6 different appointments because it's very complex. We're going to need some pre-meetings. And it's just like that. When I can't find an email, go to Gemini and be like, hey, can you find this email? And it finds it. And I'm like, I don't know how you found it because I've been digging for this thing for 10 minutes.
Right.
But I think some of that stuff is just phenomenal. And I've seen that, for people that are beginning to learn to harness it, you see these 2, 3, 5x, improvements in speed and, time to market and stuff. But I've also seen, those people that really master it where they're, producing what, one person producing what 100 people could produce. And so that to me is really exciting too, because, being a founder of a startup, I will say that it really levels the playing field from a technology standpoint, from a customer support standpoint. I mean, there's just so much that it can do because really the only limit to what it can do at this point is our imagination.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking kind of outside of, just the cybersecurity space of using AI as well, with the School of Medicine and Public Health, some of the most amazing things are happening with them being able to analyze so much more data on a larger scale, being able to make correlations that they've never been able to make before. We have a number of researchers who are doing some really cool research in relation to using AI and how it's going to make it better for, folks across the board when it comes to healthcare as well.
Oh, yeah. But one use case that I saw, I was talking to the head of, I don't know, one of the Canadian healthcare places. I forget which one, but their government healthcare organization. And they said that they had piloted in quite a few of their hospitals where the doctor didn't have to actually go in and put in any notes. So they had AI, I guess, listeners or ears in, and it's capturing everything that's happening. It's automatically putting everything into the health management system, and it's making sure that the doctor has that, quick bulleted list of what they need to know about that patient history going in. And they said they're saving like between 5 to 15 minutes per patient. And that's just tremendous savings.
Yeah.
And, when you multiply it, once you get it to scale, and I don't think anyone has that fully to scale yet, but I'm excited to see, how it'll improve healthcare, because as a patient, I hate the waits.
Yes, I went to my primary care appointment and they had something similar. And I remember, I thought this was speaking back to like the human behavior kind of thing. It was so funny. I was talking with my, general practitioner, and she was, saying to me, like, I just don't trust it. Like, she's like, I know it's giving me the notes, and everything, but she's like, I like to read through them at the end because I just want to make sure like it hasn't captured anything I don't want it to, and everything. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is great human behavior, right? From like a cybersecurity perspective of wanting to like double check that everything's good, that I know everything. But to your point, she's like, is it making my life easier? Absolutely. Do I trust it? No, not at all. Kind of deal. And I just thought that was such a juxtaposition of when it comes to AI.
Well, I think it's a shift in thinking for the average employee. For managers, they already think like managers, but for the average employee, they can now spin up 10, 15, 20 different AI employees that go out and work for them and do their tasks for them. And so I think it becomes more of a, how would I manage this job if it were a set of humans? How do I manage quality assurance when it's coming in? How do I make sure that anything being pushed to production is, what I want it to be? So I think it's a shift in mindset as well as we start to have these AI employees.
Absolutely. I also find it interesting how much I've seen, cybersecurity, when I started, it was like almost like a bad word, and like we didn't really talk about it kind of deal. And now I feel like, I think I just got from my bank the other day, like, October Cybersecurity Awareness Month, here's how you should stay safe, kind of deal as well. So I feel like it's just so much more across the board where you're seeing it more places, which I think really speaks to some of the things in your framework as well around like seeing it often, and like in other places. And so I'm like, oh, good. It doesn't just have to be me, right? And so like hearing my general practitioner be like, yeah, I don't really trust it. I want to take a look at it kind of deal. I'm like, oh, that's such a shift in a mindset, I think, for humans when it comes to cybersecurity as well.
My general practitioner still writes everything by hand, won't use a computer. But I don't worry about a data breach. And well, I mean, I've been in so many data breaches. There's one I don't have to worry about unless they physically can, like the people did at the Louvre the other day. Which only goes to show, when people think about how these incidents are going to happen, they never expect that it's going to happen in the middle of the day while everybody's there.
Right.
It doesn't. Most of the time it is, as you're going home for Thanksgiving weekend. That's when you're going to find out about the
4:30 on a Friday, without a doubt.
But it is, I think, interesting stuff we can learn there. So let's talk about the dark side of AI real quickly, because as it pertains to users, there's a whole lot of awareness issues that we have to now address because of AI.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point earlier about we're still learning about it. And I think that happens with any sort of emerging technology, right? Like we don't know much about it, which means there's constant new information coming out. But then there's also this boom of just like, there's so many new companies that you can pick from and they're all doing this thing, and how do you choose? How do you know if it's secure? How do I even go about this? And especially with, we have a lot of researchers who want to be on the bleeding edge and want to, start writing papers and do their digging into this. And so, providing a way that they can do this in a secure manner, I think is super important. We talk a lot about the fact that people are going to do it either way, right? They're going to find a way around if they really want to do it, essentially. And so to our original point around the easy path, how do I give you guidelines? How do I give you boundaries to be able to do what you want to do to get your job done, but also then put in some guardrails for you so that, as we understand more and more, we're able to kind of put in that governance structure and be able to educate folks, because that's something I've really seen is like, I'll say, well, the risk here sometimes, right, is that you put information into a chatbot, for AI, and it may spit that information back out, and it may not be to you, essentially kind of deal. And once it's kind of in the chatbot, there's not really a way to get it out. It's in the model at that point, kind of deal. And so there's been a lot of, folks who I think will say then, well, I don't really think that that's that big of a deal, and so understanding a little bit more of like, oh, or I don't think that will happen, and so kind of I think it's the human brain to kind of say like, yes, or to kind of minimize what you think the risk actually is because you really want to do this thing, right? And so because you want to do this thing, you're like, yeah, I think it'll be fine, and you kind of rationalize it in your head then as well.
Yeah, no, I think that happens with almost everybody. We actually just released a new feature. We call it Praise the Reporter, but it's really social proofing for when somebody reports a phish, where as opposed to just sending that phish out to everybody and saying, hey, be careful, don't click on this, we praise the reporter publicly, so that as opposed to that, phish that we're warning them about coming from the cybersecurity department, where they're like, oh, this won't happen to me. We're saying, hey, your coworker from down the hall in accounting just reported this. Would you have been able to spot it too? And it really helps to counter that. But I know if we're having issues with that, everyone's having issues with that hyperbolic discounting. It won't happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's just the average employee. It's the executives. Every ransomware incident that I've ever been brought in on to help respond to, the executive said the same thing. Well, we've been doing the same thing for 25 years or whatever. I mean, there's variations of this story, but I really didn't think it was ever going to happen to us, is the core lesson. And they all have the same advice to everyone else after it. It's, don't think it won't happen to you, because it's not if, it's a matter of when. And I mean, I still see things that I'm surprised they weren't compromised 10 years ago. Sometimes it's so bad.
Yeah.
But there's other times where they do everything right and they get popped even though. And so, you definitely have to be very, very careful in today's age. But the more you can plan, the less your low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating to me also how different the response is, how different it is perception-wise from, whether it's the other third parties you work with, whether you're the customer, whatever that looks like, depending on how you respond, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience, right? And so, a lot of the ones I've been involved with have really been, third parties. And so there are some where, well, this has been happening since March. And it's like, well, we're in October now, kind of deal. And it's like, we haven't heard anything from you, kind of deal. And, we heard of another one where they were basically, I'm not sure exactly how they were doing it, but they're basically making sure that like it wouldn't pop up in the news if you Googled them, essentially, kind of deal. And so, it was kind of like, that to me doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling that I want to work with you moving forward when you're not being transparent, kind of deal. And then we've had some where it's like, we get notified right away. They're on a call with us. They're like, here's what we're doing here. Here's our PIR. Here's what remediation we've done, kind of deal. And it's like, thank you for that, kind of deal. So it is fascinating to me, to your point of, it is going to happen. Are you ready for it? And how are you, that communication piece is so key for that response then.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason that we have to be doing tabletop exercises. The first time you read your incident response plan, hopefully is not during a live incident.
Right.
But too often it is. And I make the joke about it being the first time you read it. But I mean, most people on the team will have at least skimmed through it or read parts of it or even most of it. But you don't truly understand that incident response plan until you've sat down and you've tried it out. I think that the outage that we had yesterday is a great example of how terribly things can go wrong. Now, we probably shouldn't have put the entire internet on US East 1. But jokes aside, it's a great example of being prepared for and ready for any type of threat that can come. And that can be just as simple as a massive outage too. How are we going to communicate to our customers, to our users, to our staff? you name it, what's going on and how we're remediating. And I do think that's critical, because you already take that hit to trust because you're having the incident. If you don't communicate well, that's a double red flag. And I don't know of a lot of business relationships that make it through too many of those glaring red flags. So,
sure. Yeah. And go ahead. Were you going to move to another topic?
Pivot subjects a little bit here, because you, I guess, had touched on a little bit. I forget what you said that made me think about it. But one of the things that I've tried to focus on in my career is creating a positive experience for the user. And I get the impression that you're the same way, but I have to ask the question, carrot or stick, and why, if you only had to choose one?
Yeah, if I only had to choose one, it would definitely be the carrot. We've talked a lot about creating the easy path, but I also think that at the end of the day, people want to feel valued. They want to feel like they're contributing to, a larger mission, whatever that is. And I think really seeing it in research and some of the cool things that, come out of research, especially, I want to help grow that, and so I think for me, that happens with the carrot, that happens with saying, how do we collaborate with you? How do we work with you? So, I don't think those things get done when it's the stick. I think people just, to me, that has never been a motivator. And I don't see that in other folks that's a motivator, right? People don't feel valued when you use the stick, essentially. They don't feel like they are able to contribute, like you're coming to the table, and so I have not seen a positive response from folks when you use the stick. I will say, however,
I have either. And I've seen like these 3 strikes and you're out policy where you've got salespeople afraid to check their email. Like,
Right.
You just don't want to create a culture like that, because, hey, maybe you don't have people clicking on Phish, but you're going to take such a massive productivity hit that at least the CISO is probably not long for their job if you have that type of productivity hit across your organization. So I do think there's that, but it's also, it's what our moms all taught us growing up. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And I think it's really true, particularly with users, when we, how we approach them and what we do with them. So along that line, one of the things that I've tried to do a lot is reward users. And I've learned over the years that monetary is great, but there, a kudos goes a long way as well, and it's completely free. So just what do you do to motivate your users and, congratulate them and reward them?
Yeah, I totally agree that like sometimes it's just a simple email. It's a simple, hey, thank you so much for reporting, or, thank you so much for talking through this incident with me, kind of deal. I think people already come with shame and embarrassment if they've clicked on something, if they've done something that they perceive as to be wrong, in some way, shape, or form, or, someone's trying to grill them on questions, I think you get nervous, and I think that's totally normal. And so sometimes it's an email. Sometimes we have, some newsletters that will have an option for like kudos that you can put in. So sometimes we'll throw, names in there of folks who, really collaborated with us and things like that. And honestly, sometimes it's just even just making some space and time to like talk with that person. I know every CISO and a lot of folks, I should say, within cybersecurity, their calendar is full every single day, kind of deal with meetings and everything else. And so some of the feedback I've gotten is just like, thanks so much for taking a half hour out of your day to like talk with me about this, kind of deal. And so I think it's, again, you feel valued, like you said, when you have the kudos, but also when you have virtual or whether in person, but face-to-face time and like just talking with someone, they recognize on a human level, we're just, how do we work together? How do we move forward, essentially?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that those human relationships are really critical. That's one of the things we try to build in our awareness programs. We've gamified it where we tell users we're going to phish them so that if they fall for it, it's not a negative thing. But our goal isn't to catch them clicking and to lecture them or tell them how bad they're doing. Our goal, really, our primary goal anyway, is to catch them doing the right thing and praise them for it. So I'd much rather say, hey, great job reporting that email than, oops, you clicked, here were some of the red flags. And I think that too often we focus on catching them doing the wrong thing instead of catching them doing the right thing. And I think that's just a critical change in mentality that we can take for our programs to just overall make more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of flipping it. Yeah, I know. I think that goes back to like the carrot and stick question, right? Essentially around that you're trying to make sure it's almost that behavior of reinforcing the good behavior versus reinforcing the bad behavior, right? And I think sometimes when we tend to go more towards of like, well, here are the things you did wrong, kind of deal. I think sometimes those defense walls automatically go up and they haven't heard or looked at or understood a single thing that you have said after you said, well, you did this wrong, kind of deal.
Most people have a little bit, everyone's a little bit anti-authority. They're varying levels, right?
Yes.
But the second somebody messes up and I say, okay, well, you're a bad, employee and you've got to go do this training. They might do the training. They probably will because they don't want to lose their job, but they don't hear anything because they're just going through the motions to get it over with. And if anything, we probably made them less secure. And there's a lot of academic studies that point to that, where they found that traditional binge training actually makes people less secure, not more secure. And I mean, they definitely don't, it doesn't make them more secure, but there are some indications that it could possibly make them less secure, because there's a lot of studies where they actually clicked on more after the training, not less.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I was at another organization. I think it depends on, and I'd be curious of your thoughts as well. We had a phish that was so good, the simulated email, that it looked exactly like the ones that we have coming from HR, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." People got so frustrated because it didn't have any, like, they're looking for the red flags. And so I remember we got so much feedback of like, well, this is what I was looking for. And it was correct. Like, and it was like one little thing, of one red flag, that people had missed. And people were so frustrated because they were like, we're trying to do the right thing. This is so small. And we talked with them a little bit about the fact that, these are getting more and more sophisticated every single day. But I also don't know from like a human perspective, right, that was the way to go, because then they're frustrated. And to your point, I think it's the same as like them going through, having to do the training again, like, well, I'm never going to get this, so why should I even try? Why should I even try looking for these things, essentially?
Well, first and foremost, there's a behavioral science principle called learned helplessness that is very real, where somebody who is proud of their ability to, let's say, detect phishing scams, you trick them too many times using those sort of insider tactics, if you will, where they all of a sudden decide, well, maybe I'm not so good, and they give up on that, and all of a sudden they become less secure. So I think you run that risk, but I also think that when you design an email like that, you're missing the goal. If the goal is to catch them doing the right thing, then you would never get that email. But if the goal is to catch them doing the wrong thing, that is exactly what you would do. But when you have the goal of catching them doing the wrong thing and reprimanding them, you do a lot of damage to trust. And so maybe for a pen test, even that, I question it. If you make it too real, I don't see the value there. But when you're doing phishing simulations for training, you have to have that educational part with it. It's not about exploitation, because your most valuable time to educate is at the moment they realize their mistake. There's something like a 5x improvement in retention because of that emotional response that happens when they realize that mistake. So we don't want to throw that away by exploiting the users, giving them a landing page that looks identical. The URL is almost perfect. Now, I'm not saying we don't work our way up to that, but right. I think we start easy, get them really good at it, and gradually work up the difficulty so that it's not playing a game of gotchas.
Yeah, I think that's important for a lot in cybersecurity, is that incremental. A lot of times I say to my team, well, we don't want to go 0 to 100. Can we go 0 to 10? And what does that look like then, essentially? Because I think, especially at the School of Medicine Public Health, cybersecurity is still, like, the team itself is still newer in terms of like how long SMPH has been around. And so folks are still getting used to like what that means. They're still learning, like, I have to care about cybersecurity. Why, kind of deal, essentially, how does that impact them? And so I think that incremental, process for learning or anything with cybersecurity or implementing, even, especially if you know it's going to be an uphill battle, and it's going to be a tough one for folks to swallow in particular. I think that's always a good tactic to be able to get folks comfortable and you get that feedback, right? That's what I love, is that feedback loop, which I'm sure, you've seen with phishing as well, of that feedback loop of like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get this. Okay, this makes sense to me. And again, you're going more towards that positive of like, you're giving me feedback. You're saying, yes, this is going how you want it to, you're understanding, great. And you have those check-ins. Otherwise, like you said, it's 0 to 100 where you haven't worked up to it. You send that email and it's one little thing wrong and everyone's like, well, I can't do this at all, and I think that motivation then just plummets.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to that point, I had this just eye-opening experience where I had told this hedge fund CEO, hey, you need to implement security awareness training. He implemented it. The next year, we just run all over them again. There was zero improvement. And I said, well, you need to do more security awareness training. And he comes back to me and he says, well, my employees' time costs me $10,000 an hour. Me how many employees, exactly how much money it cost him to do that 1 hour of training that he already did, and he said, I'm not willing to spend any more on this. And initially I thought, well, if 1 hour isn't cutting it, then maybe we need two. But as I thought about it more and more, I realized that 1 hour, if we broke it into 30-second chunks, we could be in front of that user twice a week, every week of the year. And then I realized, well, we probably don't need to be in front of them twice a week, every week of the year. So maybe just once a week, and we could use half the time. And it really just made me realize that we've been using our time incredibly inefficiently in cybersecurity. And we try to do things like, hey, here are 12 different ways to avoid clicking on a phish, when it should be just watch out for urgency, watch out for authority, think before you click. And not all three of those, just one at a time, so that we push those core concepts. And one other thing that you sort of got me thinking about while you were talking about that was how we've done a shift in policy. You said they're still wrapping their brain around how they need to do cybersecurity and why. And we've made that a lot easier with our policy. So about 2 years ago, I realized our policy is written by lawyers for lawyers. It is not something that is human readable. And as we were developing the social engineering for good framework, we realized that there's a thing called a commitment bias, and people are actually biased to do what they say they'll do. And if we give them policy that's human readable, all of a sudden they will actually follow through on it. And so we switched to a master policy that is nothing but a 1-paragraph user pledge that states that cybersecurity is part of their job, anchors it back to their paycheck. And so that they understand why they're protecting their customers, their students, their users, whatever, right? And they sign that, and then all the rest of the policy are these, at most 10 bullet points, human readable documents that are sort of put in ad hoc. So you've got your, acceptable use or remote work or whatever, right? And we've seen a drastic improvement in overall awareness just simply by changing how we did our policy. And I love NIST, but I think they did us a little bit of a disjustice with all those policy templates. They looked great, but I think maybe they weren't so great. That's what I'll say about it. But
yeah. I love that. I totally agree. We've talked a lot about within my team around, who's the audience and how do we make this plain language? We have a number so we've kind of gone through with guidance documents. We have so much policy across higher education, I will say in general, but also at UW Madison and SMPH. And so I always say those policies are for the auditor when they come, kind of deal, kind of like you're saying, like with NIST, like those are for the auditor. What do we actually want for the end user? And what does that look like for your average person? How do we use plain language? How do we understand them as an audience? How do we get feedback from them on all of those? We've kind of gone the route of guidance documents, like here's your easy path. Here's what that looks like at SMPH. Here's how you should be doing that essentially. And we've seen a lot of increased traffic to looking at those of like, oh, okay, this is how I do it. Great. I want to do the right thing. I just don't know what the answer is. And I don't know where to go find that answer. So as long as I can get you to, hey, I can find you that answer. Here's where you go to look for it. A lot of folks are willing to do that, the next step, right, of them looking at it, reviewing it, seeing what works for them. But I totally agree that, basics. I want basics here. I don't need you to be a subject matter expert in cybersecurity in any way, shape, or form. I just need you to understand the basics, but we do not do a good job of showing that on paper or documents, and especially not in policy.
Totally agreed. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time today. Any final thoughts for the audience before we wrap up?
Oh, I just think, don't let someone put you in a box. I will say I'll leave you with a story. When I was in college, I took a leadership course, and my professor at the end, the final thing was to write a paper on, we researched all the leadership styles and, figured out, all the different things related to them. Final paper was to basically write what your leadership style was. And I remember saying, well, I don't really fit into any of these boxes. Like none of these styles really fit me of how I want to lead. And I put a couple together, and I remember a professor saying I was the first person who ever said, I'm not just going to write on, what I think the leadership style is that I'm going to create my own leadership style. So I'll leave you with that. That sounds like you're creating your own path with your framework and, how you're moving forward with phishing awareness. And I hope also that to the audience, then you create your own leadership styles moving forward.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And welcome back, everyone, to season 2. And we're looking forward to all the new episodes. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
White text, black screen, email looking clean. Hey there, urgent thing, click here, don't be mean. Big prize, fake links. Oh, it's quite a scene. If you don't look close, you'll lose your whole machine. Oh no, they gotcha. Sending